So thanks everyone for coming along to the Globus webinar today. We've got Jay Van Scandel from Monash and Chris Myers from RNet with us today, and they're going to be giving a brief demonstration of Globus and explaining what it is and what it can do for you and help you with your data transfer. And they'll also be explaining to you how you might like to set up your own Globus account to get started with moving some data in and out of the CVL or the HPC system. Thanks, Jay.
Hi all, so I'll be starting off the chat on the slides today, just changing it up a bit. So that's all good. So welcome, and yeah, so any questions pop them in the chat or hold them off to the end, and then we'll get through them as we do. So today we're going to have a general chat about Globus, some of the features, where we're at within the ACCS project, and then Jay's going to do some demonstrations on the client tools that can be used to transfer data and how we can see that being used within the instrumentation space for the ACCS project. Okay, next slide, Jay, please. So some of you will be aware of Globus. It's been around for a long time, since 1997. It's coming out of the University of Chicago. It's still coming out of the University of Chicago, and it's set up as a not-for-profit there. So it's not one of the big companies doing it. And it lets you transfer data securely between sites, between third-party transfers, clients up to servers, and around the globe. So we'll be moving through that locally and internationally at pace, or securely and regularly. Next slide, please. So with Globus, you get an access to a global network using endpoints, personal endpoints, and you can access these via, so most of the universities are connected to the AAF. There's an extension to that, which at least half the unis are connected to, called Edugain, and that allows you to use your SSO within the university to log into Globus. If you don't have that, you should talk to your ITS department about whether the university can join Edugain, and that'll give you SSO connections in. You can also use your Google, Orchid, or for an extra fee, there can be an SSO integration directly from your AD services into Globus. So what Globus allows us to do is, fundamentally, the best part is third-party transfers. So that means that you can set up a transfer to go and shut your laptop. That's if the data is not on your laptop. So if your data is moving between two sites, like between Wollongong and Monash to Massive, like that. So you'd be able to start the data transferring, shut down a laptop, or go off and do other work and not have to worry about that transfer going. There's many ways this can be accessed through web APIs or and also through the CLI. The web user experience is quite good, quite easy to do, 2 panels, lots of information and tricks that we'll go through later on. Respects the POSIX file system underneath, so you can override them or you can let them stand, so you can have users come in and standard POSIX file rights extend out into it. You can also connect third-party connectors that we'll talk about in a bit. So there's some of those on the left where you can connect to Ceph, Amazon S3, Google, and present them all within the same single pane of glass to your user community. The services can also be in high assurance and HIPAA compliant. We'll go into more details on that. That increases the security level of the data and restricts some of the flexibility on what you can do when you're downloading, so you can't download unencrypted. The HIPAA compliant requires a contractual agreement between your endpoint and Globus directly as well, just to meet that HIPAA compliance. Globus platforms, so the APIs are important, so there's lots of RESTful APIs that you can connect to and trigger, so you can integrate these services into your own portals if you have your own portals, LIMS, or workflows that you've got, so you can actually integrate into this system without and keep people within your user space. And there's a lot of Python SDKs that you can pull down, or example scripts that you can pull down and write into your systems to increase the flexibility of the system and do things like metadata discovery, timers, transfer, third-party transfer components from within different environments. So we'll get into that part a bit later on. So next slide, Jake. So within Globus, there's a large community. So this was taken a little while back. So this image is care of Globus in Chicago. So there's, at this time, there was 35,000 different endpoints available globally. So it means that not only are we building a network within Australia to support the ACCS community in transferring the data backwards and forwards, but you're joining a larger community with lots of examples of these in labs in the US and in Europe and Asia. So you'll be able to find other endpoints where you can transfer the data backwards and forwards and increase that ability to reach your outcomes faster. Lots of countries, lots of data moved, lots of facilities for connectors, tape, high performance computing, clouds, 180,000 registered users. That's a lot of active users using it. And we keep seeing more and more integration components coming in. So the new ones coming in are the workflow automation, which looks very interesting. So you can stage through multiple steps of your transfers. So you can transfer data, run a job, and the output, move that output to somewhere else to archive it. So you can actually start to build up a workflow using some of these tools to increase your capabilities. Next slide. This is where the funding for Globus comes from. So they've had substantial NIH and NFS funding, and also it's widely used within the Department of Energy. So we're seeing this is shown that it's since 1997 it's been around, so it keeps pushing forward and forward and forward. So it's something we're hoping we can rely on to be here in the years to come. You can't always guarantee these things, but it looks like it's something that's going to be here for a while. Next slide, please. This is an example of some of the sites that currently use the software around the world. Some of them will be familiar to you, some won't be. And there's a lot more than this. This is just their highlight page. And you can see AARNet, you can see New Zealand in there, a lot of universities in the United States. Yeah, so we'll move forward to the next slide. So why do people use Globus? So the web interface is quite intuitive. It's much better, like if any of you used in the old days where it was just CLI and you're writing out 90, 120 characters, big long strings and things like that, and X509 certificates and wonderful things like that. That's not what it's like now. You don't have to use those tools, so you can breathe a sigh of relief with that. You get full encryption in flight. You can do file integrity checking. There's a whole heap of features where you can actually, on successful movement of the data, delete the old version of it. There's a whole heap of flexibility within there that you can build the workflows to customize the transfers to customize your requirements. With the use of Globus and the DTN type services we've been putting in place, you can overcome latency in our data transfers, and that's really the speed of the disk subsystems, and latency is what has been affecting our ability to transfer data over the long haul. So, you know, Melbourne to Perth, Melbourne to Brisbane, overseas. That really, when you get to products like SFTP, rsync, SCP, they really struggle over those distances, and you get very high performance impact when you're transferring them. With Globus, you can sort of sustain a higher level, and with the tuning of the DTNs, we can sustain that level much higher. So we've seen throughputs in the 10s to 20s of gigs. So you can really start to push the envelopes up. One other key advantage is you can, but you don't require shell access. So a lot of the archives or connected to data sites overseas, you can't just ring up and say, hey, I want to transfer your data down. Can you hook me up a Shell account, right? One, it takes ages to do it if they will do it. And you've got to transfer your public keys or set up passwords, do all that. They expire every year, all those wonderful things like that. But you get Shell access to a foreign system. And, lots of people don't like giving non-institutional, non-active people in that area Shell access to their systems. So Globus gives us a way to give you the ability to transfer the data, but not to require Shell access like you would for SCP, or at least or that kind of auth access. We get a lot of resiliency in the transfer, so you can set up clusters and they can fail over. So you can do round robbery across systems to transfer into the same spots. It improves your throughput, but it also means that you can pull servers out to service them, and the Globus service keeps running and transfers keep going. Third-party transfers, I've said that a couple of times, that is really important in allowing endpoint-to-endpoint data transfers. So that way your local machines are not getting in the way of achieving high throughput between two different facilities. And it's a real advantage. Next slide, please. So within the Globus suite of products, within the AARNet's offering subscriptions to people under trial at the moment, and we'll see what happens further on with that. So a lot of universities have already taken up and starting to use it, or research facilities. So the encryption, we're offering the standard edition, which allows for encryption. There's one version below that's free. So if you don't want to be part of the AARNet subscription, then you can actually drop back. There's high assurance subscriptions. There's high assurance versions which enforce encryption at risk. They force increased audit logging, session isolation, brings you up to a higher NIST standard of requirements, which is mainly around the auditing and requiring encryption in transit and encryption at rest. Then you get to the HIPAA compliant, which again is more auditing, plus the logging, and also the end-to-end support agreement with Globus. So the high assurance and HIPAA licensings will be made available through AARNet, just at a small increase above the standard subscription offer. Next one. Okay, so far within the ACCS project, we've got 2 endpoints have been set up at Massive. They're version 4 endpoints that are being upgraded to version 5 as Jay moves forward. These allow you to write into the Massive file system, into the project areas. I suggest if you've got an account on Massive, give it a go, log into Globus, see how it works, see if you can transfer the data up. Even if it's not about the ACCS project, it may give you other advantages into moving data in and out of Massive as you go forward. The University of Wollongong has got a personal endpoint up, and has been testing data movements between Massive and AARNet, and they're moving to have a production server in place with their new storage facility to transfer data from Wollongong into Massive. AARNet, so far, we've got a whole bunch of test servers in place. We've got 2 test servers, and I'm bringing up a test cluster at the moment. And we can enable read and write testing. The writing out testing, you just have to request to us. We'll make that available to you, and they're all version 5 servers. Also, there's the personal client. So part of the AARNet subscription, you get a plus pack. So the personal endpoints you can actually download and you can share from that. You can also write up from your local machine or laptop to an endpoint, or bring data back down from that endpoint. And they're free, and with the subscription you can share, so you can send data from endpoint to endpoint, personal endpoint to personal endpoint. And we're seeing the personal endpoints. Jay's going to go into more details on this, but as a good way of simple instruments with legacy type operating systems on them, still being able to maintain a connection and push data up into into the characterization areas or into Massive. Next, please. Currently, we have deployments underway in CSIRO, University in UNSW, University of Wollongong, Monash, Swinburne, DPIE, and the University of Queensland. So they've made significant pushes forward in having servers ready to go. There's several universities and facilities in progress. And we also have lots of other third parties that we've had conversations with. So we're slowly building up a bigger and bigger ecosystem within Australia, because these are always like an n squared problems. The more nodes that you have with the endpoints, the better it off is for everyone, because the options to transfer the data around are high. Next, please. So over to Jay.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, for the presentation today, I'm going to focus around maybe individuals pushing their data, or facilities pushing data, rather than a focus from a Globus server point of view. So the Globus Personal Connect is, you can run that on an instrument PC, your laptop, desktop, wherever you have any data that you need to push from. And it's quite easy to install. It's just like a normal app. You download, you install it on your machine. One thing that's great about Connect Personal is there's support for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Okay, so if you're interested, you can just follow this link and install it on your machine. And I'll show you a demo in a few minutes on how to use it. Okay, the other option is Globus Connect Server. So depending upon your requirements, like for instance, if you've got a large facility with lots of data and lots of users, and you may prefer to install a server. So you need system administration level access to perform an installation, and we do recommend that you contact your local IT support at your institution, because there will most likely be firewall changes required to get the server up and running. And the server does require a Linux box. There is no Windows or Mac version to run the server. It's purely Linux. Okay. So as part of ACCS, I developed a set of Ansible scripts for deploying Globus endpoints. Ansible is a way for automating an installation, basically. And this is how we deploy software on Massive, for instance, to provide service. So feel free to have a look at this link. The scripts have been built to support two different flavors of endpoints, I guess. Massive, there's one installed at the moment called Massive. This is general access on the public IP network. The other box is being referred to at the moment as Massive MERN. This is sitting on the private Monash eResearch network, so that instruments on the network internal to Monash can push into Massive. Okay, and obviously, great place to start looking is the Globus Connect server installation software and the documentation here. It's worth a read. And AARNet have also provided a contact for the data movers for any subscription inquiries and also for assistance. Okay, let's do a live demo. I'll just hop out of this. Okay, before I start, I'm just going to show that up here on the on my task system tray, I've got Personal Connect already installed, running on my iMac here. And we'll use this to push a bit of data in and out, but also I'll show you how to push data server to server using Globus. So I'm just going to switch over to my incognito window here so we can log in. Now, Monash is now a member of EduGain. So if your organization is a member of EduGain, you'll appear in this drop-down list, and you can sign on using your institution's credentials. So I'm just going to select Monash Uni, And okay, it's been sitting here for a while, so I'm just going to refresh this page and we'll start again. Okay, log in. Okay, Monash, continue. Okay. Okay, so I'm now using the Monash authentication process. I should say mine's a little different. I've set up a YubiKey just to have a play around with the technology. Okay, so I'm going to prove my details. So all going well. Okay, we're now in the Globus web app. So this is where we transfer the data around. And in the file manager, I like to open two panels up the top here. So let's have a go at moving some data, let's say from my iMac, which is what we're connected on here. And it's going to provide a listing of the files on my system. Okay. And let's log into Massive using the general access account. So now it's going to ask me to authenticate into Massive, which is I've already done before. But what I might do is I'm going to disconnect that, deactivate that endpoint just to show you what it looks like. We'll just go for a little detour. And I'll talk a bit about this a bit longer. So if I go back to the file manager and we do a reload here, Massive, it should ask me to authenticate. Okay, sometimes there's a bit of a delay. Deactivate. Okay. Open the file manager. Okay, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I have to sort that out. But normally it then redirects me off to another website, which is running on Massive itself. And I have to enter my Massive credentials to log in. Once you normally authenticate to Massive, the server's configured so that it's active for 7 days, so that you can have data transfers moving over a multi-day period. And this is particularly handy if you're moving very large amounts of data from overseas. So if I want to move a file, I'm just going to go to my downloads folder on my Mac and I'm going to pick something. Okay, just an image. So I can highlight it here, and on Massive, I don't really want to put it in my my home folder. So I'm going to go off to the Scratch storage. And I've got a J folder here somewhere. Okay, we'll push it in here. Okay, so I can then click on the start button. So, but before I do that, I just want to show a few options. If you click on transfer options here, you can turn off verification. So if you really want to make it transfer data quite quickly and you're not too fast, not too worried about integrity, you can turn that off. You can turn on preserve source and file modification times. You can encrypt the transfer. So the server on Massive isn't mandating encryption, but if you were to install a server, you can turn that on to make it mandatory if you want to. There's a synchronization option, so you can sync files between two systems. Okay, so I'm just going to, I'm going to hit the start button. Okay, so what it does, it then submits a request to the two servers. Now, this time it happens to be that there's actually one running on my Mac here, but my Mac and the Massive server, they're going to talk to each other directly. So if I click on the activity here over in the corner, we can find out that, okay, the transfer is already completed because it was just a single file, but we can go in here and view the details. So it's uploaded the data at 182 kilobytes per second. So we're at home, it's not that quick. Okay, but if we go back to File Manager, and instead of using my iMac connection, I'm going to use the AARNet public test share. So in this scenario, we're just using the web API to orchestrate the transfer. The web API is not actually doing the transfer itself. We're just telling the two servers to talk to each other and to organize and to kick off the transfer. So I'm just going to make sure that I haven't got this sitting here from before I do. So I'm just going to delete it because I've obviously done this demo a few times. So there's options here in the middle that allow you to manipulate files. You can delete, share, rename, the usual file activities you'd expect to see. So let's go delete. We'll just wait a little bit for this to occur. Okay, so that's done. So let's come back to our 500 gig enlarged files. And I'm going to hit transfer. So this has created the activity. So we can now see the activity starting over here. Particularly for large data sets, it can take Globus sometimes a while to get going. Actually, it looks like my delete hasn't completed. We'll see what happens because I'm trying to delete and transfer at once. What I might do is just cancel that one. And we'll just wait for the delete to complete. Actually, while we're waiting, let's move something different. So I'm not holding up the demonstration. We'll just pick a single 100 gig file, a 500 gig file, for instance. Take that one off. Okay, let's hit start. Okay, so we're just transferring a single file. Just to give you an idea, the server running on Massive is just 6 cores on a 10 gig network. Using the 500 gig sample of large files, I've been able to transfer data in at 1 gigabyte per second between these two services in the past. Let's have a look to see what we're getting with our single file. The single files don't tend to ramp up as well in terms of transfer. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, it hasn't quite started yet. So maybe I'll come back to this one in a minute. I'll just take you on a bit more of a tour around the Globus web app. So we've already had a look at the file manager. For bookmarks, you can create your own collections and bookmark endpoints that you use frequently so that you don't need to go looking for them all the time. Endpoints is basically a list of obviously recently used endpoints, ones that you're using, ones that you can share, and I'll show you the share feature in just a second because I've turned that on a Massive. Ones that have been shared with me. Since Monash is a subscriber to Globus and I'm the subscription manager, Globus provides monthly usage reports. So if we want to see who's using the service and how much data is being moved in and out, we can look at these reports. And these are just all the endpoints that I administer. So I've done a fair bit of testing. Okay, just have a look at the console. If you're a subscription manager, you can get access to this console mechanism. And what it lets you do is see live transfers on your endpoints when they're managed. The thing that's great about this is if you need to do maintenance on your endpoint, you can go to an endpoint. So I could click on, I can go to endpoint here and click on, let's say, Massive. And here we can see my live transfer, right? This is the 500 gig file we created. So it's moving at 528 megabytes per second. But so if you're going to need to maintain your endpoints, what you can do is you can create a pause rule. And the pause rule will, you can apply it to current and new tasks or just new tasks only. And this will send an email to those users who are impacted by it. And it'll stop all the transfers on Globus. And you can go and do your maintenance that you need to, and then just come back and take off the pause rule. And I've used this a couple of times. It's quite good. And you can monitor all the transfers. So Globus recently introduced this new functionality called flows, which I'm just going to give access to. So I'm basically giving flows permission to use my account with Globus. So in here, you can create workflows to move data around. I haven't had to play with this yet, but it could be quite handy depending upon what you want to achieve. And the rest of it is just my account information. So I'm just going to jump back and show you the sharing. So on Massive, sharing has been enabled. So by default, I've only set it up for read-only sharing access. So the beauty of this is quite often, sometimes our researchers who use Massive need to share data with third parties, but they don't have Massive accounts. They could be from overseas. So it's not easy for us to easily create accounts on Massive to share their data. But as a user, what you could do is you could say, I want to share a particular folder. And then you click on the share button. And what that lets you do is set restrictions on that share. And then you can add that user, say your contact from overseas, into the account, into that share, so that they can then gain access to that information. Massive is only read-only sharing. We don't want third parties writing to Massive's file system with whom we don't know. And the sharing operates underneath, because I've authenticated access into Massive. Anything I share looks as if it's my user account accessing the data. Okay. I think that's probably it as far as our quick tour goes. We'll just have another look at our activity, see how our transfer is going. So far we've moved 196 gig of our 500 gig file. So the speed's not too bad considering it's just a single file. Okay. Now I'll just switch back to the presentation. Okay, there's our demo. Oh, one thing I just want to mention. So here I've logged on to Globus using my Monash credentials, but if you have a Google account, Orchid, you can use those. And the third option is you can actually create a Globus ID account to sign in. Globus, I guess, prefer you to use this one as last resort. This gets you access to the app. And once you're in, you then need to authenticate to any endpoints that you need to, you want to push data between. Obviously, if you've got Personal Connect running on your desktop machine, you don't need to authenticate to that one, but any other endpoints you may need to. Okay, so I've put this slide together just maybe as a way to discuss data flow from an instrument or a facility to where compute may be. So there's a few different options. You could either install a Globus Personal Connect on the machine. Whoops, I'm just going to go back. Sorry about that. On the machine, depending, or if you've got a larger facility with many users, it may be worthwhile installing a Globus Connect server at that facility. There's a lot of functionality on GitHub that Globus supplies for accessing the API and for building workflows that may match your requirements. I just wanted to draw your attention to the Globus timer. This seems to be quite interesting in that You can schedule data transfers that will operate on your behalf. It's command line based. It's Python, so it's fairly easy to get up and running. So once you authenticate into Globus itself, you then just need to authenticate between the endpoints that you want to push your data. And you may need to periodically re-authenticate to those endpoints. For instance, like as I said, Massive is activated for 7 days. So if you've got data transfer running regularly between, let's say, an instrument and Massive, after 7 days, you'd have to log in there and just reactivate that endpoint access. Okay. Okay, so on our references page, I've got quite a few handy links. Globus Connect Personal, some documentation on how to use Globus at Massive and how to access it. These are the links. This is the link to the Ansible scripts for deploying Globus in an automation manner. Documentation for the server. If you're going to go down the path of installing the server, I recommend you have a look at the performance tuning. The fasterdata.es.net site has some great information on how to tune networks and hosts to get more performance out of those boxes. But you probably need admin level access to machines to do that, and probably some input from your local IT department. And for any support, you can contact Data Movers at AARNet. Globus have support too, and they're pretty good as well. I'd like to open up to questions.
Thanks so much, Jay. Thanks so much, Chris. There's been a couple of comments coming up in the chat window there, and if anyone else has any, please feel free to put them in. But to get us started, Rika's asked a question about data transfer speed experiences. She says that Europe has been a pain point for them, and I wondered, could you guys talk about the speed of transfers or your experiences with it? Okay, so from a Massive point of view, I've had some international collaborators pushing data in. I regularly get some data sets from Tokyo. This is large cryo-EM data sets consisting of maybe 6 or 7 terabytes at a go. I helped a group recently on Massive pull some data in from Brazil. I think it was only about 150 gig, but it took 12 minutes using Globus. So that's not bad. I've had a researcher from the University of Wollongong share some cryo-EM data with a service called Empire. Empire is like a cryo-EM data repository, and they support Globus from an upload point of view. I'm unable to comment on the transfer rate for that because I can't remember. I'm just trying to think if I had any data come directly from Europe. Oh, actually, Empire is in Europe, but nothing directly. Oh, sorry, nothing recent. I guess if you're having difficulties with the networking, there's lots of pieces in the jigsaw puzzle between, let's say, where we are here in Australia and what is at the other end. I have been dealing with a group at Thermo Fisher in the Netherlands, and although they're not using Globus, we've been using another service that we have at Massive called Aspera, and they've had a lot of internal firewall issues blocking them from using that service to push data. So maybe there's firewall issues somewhere that's preventing access to the high-speed networks. The problem could just be that maybe if it's just on a normal local desktop PC, the data, we're limited to 1 gigabit per second on most desktop boxes. So I think it's certainly, yeah. Sorry, Jake, they're saying
That's all right.
They've had problems with Spain and Italy and Finland.
Yeah, it's hard to comment.
Is it an institutional case-by-case situation?
Yeah, I think so. You'd need to approach each institution and have a look at it.
Yeah, so we'd be more than willing to have a chat about the problem, what you've been experiencing there, you can get in contact with us. I've done transfers of grid FTP, which is the underlying technology from CERN to Sydney and to Melbourne at 49.55 gigabits per second transfer rates. And we're regularly, 2 weeks ago, I was doing transfers to Japan to Australia at 2 times 52 gigabits per second via 2 different paths from Tokyo. Within Europe, the link, that's the Indigo link going from Perth and Sydney into Singapore. Then there's a link from Singapore to London that's 100 gig that we use for the research community. So when they're connected to the research community networks, or ARINs, we should be able to facilitate high-speed transfers. But it does come down to a lot to the performance between the 2 different systems that you transfer the nodes to and any restrictions they have. But within the universities in Finland, like the Netherlands, we've done heaps too, and that's been great. But more than happy to talk more about it.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
So, should people email the Data Movers website address? Does that come to you? Or? Yeah,
so if you talk to Andrew knows me, and he can hit me up to make sure it's working. So we've been working with him for the PSA data and things like that.
Data Movers at arnet.eu.
Yes. Yeah, but he's indicated he knows Andrew and he can talk to me. So EMBL.
And Stefan was also asking another question there about, he was following along, I think, and he had a problem with the PAM authentication. Stefan, would you like to ask that question directly?
I can. I got an authentication error, so I was just wondering if there's anything else that that I need to apply for to get access.
There shouldn't be, Stefan. I'll have to have a look at that. It should just be your normal massive username and password to log in.
I'll try again.
Yeah, so if that's a problem, I'll have a closer look at it. Yep, maybe just ping me after this meeting and I'll have a look at it for you.
Yeah, and yeah, it's similar to, I just transferred some data from the MBL, EBI. They've got some grid FTP nodes put up there. And I was getting effective speeds of 144 megabytes per second, so just under a gigabit per second, coming from directly from that location in Europe.
And I can see that Chung Han has just pasted in the chat that he's pushed data from EMBL to Pawsey Nimbus. It's been able to reach 82 megabytes per second.
Yeah, so we see it definitely over the long haul, a performance increase, and the ability to overcome the latency components and the stalling TCP gets when you're using SCP and TCP within the window framing. So that effectiveness using different congestion control methods, and also increased buffer sizes, and then the overlying tools as well as that, where Globus will parallel up transfers, so that way you get even though it may be good at running at X speed, when you have 10 or 20 of them running in parallel, you can increase the performance substantially between the 2 sites. So yeah, does that answer everyone? Does anyone else have any other questions? You set up a transfer node. Yes, Frank. Yeah. So yeah, moving data within AWS does cost money, but yeah, you can max out the VM links going in and out, especially if you're using the SSD connected to your instances. Is that? Yes, but you can definitely install this software on AWS. If you have that as a target node. You can also use the AWS connector, and then you can present the data through your a Globus portal with other POSIX file, mixed systems POSIX or Azure or Google type file systems. Oh, cool. So yes, that's good.
Does anyone else have any other questions or comments they'd like to ask now? The questions just come through now from Chung Han. Chris, has anyone tested disable anonymous rights for creating collection? Do you know anything about this?
No, I haven't played with that one. So, oh, in the GCS update from version 5.4.2.7, I haven't got 5.4 running on Massive yet. So, hopefully in the next week or two, I'll get it in. But I'll have
and the command line tool doesn't mirror all of the features available within the API infrastructure. It always lags a little behind.
It's only a new update.
Okay, looks like Stefan's been able to get in. That's good.
Yeah, and yes, yeah. Globus is good for doing these transfers. There's heaps of there is other tools out there, but Globus is one we're pushing with at the moment to seems to give us that good flexibility in the delivery components.
I guess the thing I like about it is the interface is quite easy, and so even if I've even seen a user log into Massive and use it to move data around Massive.
Yeah, and one nice part is the client endpoint, the point-to-point transfers, it's all through the same interface. There's not a different view that you have to take to do those different activities. So that's important in keeping that user UX experience the same. So the less training for everyone, like, oh, but it's different on this one, different on this one, and the Mac and the Windows versions all look the same. So you can sort of do a screenshot within your browser and show someone how to do something, and it feels the same for everyone, which is nice.
I have a question from Frank. In the Massive implementation, how many transfer nodes do I use? At the moment, I'm using a 6-core box, which was just set up from as a dev box to get it up and going with Globus v4. When I push Globus v5 out, it'll be installed on both the DTNs on Massive. And if I remember properly, I think both those machines, there's 36 core boxes. So it'll be able to support a lot more users and hopefully better throughput. But I think even with that 6-core box, we can push data at 1 gigabyte per second. So I think that's pretty good. But just for the sake of load spreading and redundancy, it'll be spread across both DTNs for v5. You can install v4 that way, but that's not how we've approached it to get going.
And guys, I just wondered if maybe we could ask you both to comment on the use or the transfer of sensitive data using Globus. Are there any circumstances where you may or may not be wanting to use Globus, or any different conditions you might need to put in place depending on your data type?
Good question, Catherine. Okay, so as Chris mentioned earlier, there's a couple of different subscription types. Massive is currently set up with the standard installation. So I wouldn't be using it to store highly sensitive data, and Massive isn't designed to be used for keeping highly sensitive data. So when I refer to that, I'm talking about particularly medical data with personally identifiable information in it. And for that type of data, you'd probably need to get pay for the HIPAA subscription, and which has a lot more logging. Encryption is turned on, so it's mandatory for all transfers, and there's a lot more checking on that service. So it'd be best to engage with either AARNet or Globus if you're after a Globus installation that supports the transfer of sensitive data.
Yeah, so the two new standards are up there that are when you take up a high assurance subscription, that'll you've got to build the system in a certain way to meet that requirement, but that'll bring you up to a non-government, level of a high assurance level within US levels. The HIPAA compliant one is compliant with HIPAA. There's rules on how you have to set up the server. There's limitations where they're doing all data transfers encrypted, selected endpoint entries, things like that. So there's increased logging. So there's more components you have to do to the install and the configuration maintenance of the server to make it compliant, and also the business agreement with them. But yes, so it comes down, like, sensitive data is like a big bowl, right? It depends how sensitive it is and what it is, and like you can mandate from an endpoint that all data transferred off it's encrypted. So you can make that. You can say that I'll only accept 2FA connections, things like that. So you can secure up, you can lock down systems further and further as you see that need or that requirement kicking. But it comes down to what level of security you require, but you can get it to a good level, and then you've got to start looking at these other ones if you want high assurance or moving into sort of personal identifiable data or medical data, clinical data.
Well, thanks, guys. I can't take credit for the question, Jay. It was David.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I'd just like to thank you both so much for your time today in talking to us all and explaining about it. We are able to make a copy of your slides available to people so that they may get those links and things.
Yep.
And also I will share a copy of this recording with people so that if they want to watch the demonstration again and follow through those steps, they can watch it again. And if they run into any troubles, they can get in touch with Data Movers. Do you recommend that if they do have any problems locally, that they get in touch with their local IT? Or is that the way?
It depends. It's probably a good place to start. It depends upon what the issues are, really. Whether it's installing the software or maybe connectivity issues, firewall challenges.
Yeah, so when you install the server version, there's some incoming ports that are required to be opened. So you need engagement with your IT department, not so much with the personal client, but definitely with the standalone, the server components, and your security team with that. Also, if you start filling up Flink going out, they'd like to know who you are, so because you have that capability with these types of services. Also within AARNet, we've got a Slack channel where people can help each other. Also reach out to us on the email address within the slides, and that goes into our ticketing queue system, and we'll get back to you and help you as what we can. And we also have either monthly or bi-monthly meetings with the Globus team in the US, a community So Vaz and one or two of their either developers or security guys or architects will actually join in on the call and can answer questions directly to the community. So if you have questions or would like things done differently, or there's a topic area each meeting, like whether it's security or architecture or what can you do with it, those sorts of things. So feel free to join those as well. And yeah, we have a Slack channel that people can join that we can answer questions as well.
Yeah, it's worthwhile joining that meeting with Arnet and Globus. Globus itself also runs, I think they call it a town hall meeting about once a month. I've attended. The timing of it is a bit rough given our time zone, but in the couple of times I've joined, there's lots of people who are installing the service and using it in different manners. And even if you just listen, you can learn a few different ways to approach things that you maybe hadn't thought of, or a few different use cases.
They've got a world tour.
I think that's it, yeah. And there might be one on, I think there may be.
On the 16th, early morning.
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's usually 6 a.m. in Melbourne time.
Yeah.
It's a bit rough.
Yeah, I know.
And quite often they're recorded as well, so you can go back and watch the previous ones. And the last one I saw, which I think was the last one they did, was on instrument data transfers. So key to our area of
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
And that's so they can find all that information at globus.org. They've got an events page there, and you can register directly for their events on globus.org. Well, thank you both so much. And thank you everyone for coming along. And please feel free to keep in touch and keep the conversation going if there's any way we can help you at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.